All right, Elliotte, here we go. 31 Thoughts podcast again. First of all, thanks for all the compliments and comments we got last week about not only talking to Tyler Seguin, but also Dallas Green. I had more people text me and call me and pull me aside about Dallas Green, like hockey people. I won't name them because I don't want to embarrass them. Angry, like local guys, that we didn't invite in to meet Dallas because they're huge fans. Enormous
Well, that's
fans.
because you're a selfish person.
I am. That's right. And so are you, Elliotte, because you didn't spread it around
anyone either.
We didn't, but thanks again to Dallas Green last week and Tyler Seguin. Coming up this week, Blake Wheeler of the Winnipeg Jets. Looking forward to that conversation. In the meantime, by the time this podcast is released, we may already know what the number is. But Tom Wilson's probably going to get a big one for the hit on Oskar Sundqvist.
It's interesting that Brian McClellan, the GM of the Capitals, has come right out and said one of the reasons they made the Dmitry Yaskin waiver claim from St. Louis is because they're preparing for this. And from what I understand, the pressure on the NHL to do something here is enormous. So, Sunday afternoon, it's the last Sunday before, hockey season starts. I'm with my family. We were watching football for a little bit, but then I was out. And then all of a sudden, the first text came, did you just see what just happened?
Yeah.
And then there were more, and then you started to figure out with Tom Wilson and Sundqvist. And I understand that the phones just blew up in the NHL offices too. Like, did you guys see this? And I'm not surprised at all he was offered an in-person hearing. The fact is it's Wednesday morning in New York. And the Capitals play Wednesday night, obviously, with their banner raising, and they like to get those things done. So, but I heard that, like, the phones blew up. Like, you got to do something about this. And the league tries to push back on that stuff.
This is from other teams to the
other teams, media, you name it. It comes from everywhere. And the league does push back on that stuff because they're sitting there saying, if he does appeal this, we don't want the appearance of bias, but I was told just the amount of messages, calls, whatever, texts, whatever you want to call them, they were off the charts. Like people were demanding that something get done here.
We've talked about Tom Wilson a lot on this podcast. Anyone that runs any type of hockey media has had the Tom Wilson conversation. Last season, we sort of arrived at the point that, Tom Wilson is unique because there's no one really like him in the NHL. And
that's true.
Once upon a time, each team had a couple of sluggers and a couple of heavy hitters. Now there's only a couple of guys, which makes it more and more pronounced. And, we're growing up and, I think the Connor McDavid group was the first one that grew up with this rules package just being hockey. Didn't have to break any habits, didn't have to relearn the game. This is just hockey. And they go up and go through minor hockey where there isn't that volume of heavy hitting like that anymore. Like there's not headhunters really anymore, and they get weeded out by the time you get into. Junior hockey has fighting rules, and they're weighing in on heavy suspensions, 10 games, 12 games, 20 games. Like there are heavy suspensions in junior hockey now for headshots. So generally, by the time you get to the NHL, these guys are weeded out. Like he's one of the last men standing.
Yes.
Maybe the last man standing of that type of body checker.
I agree with that 1,000%. He's a good player. He's the reason they won the Stanley Cup last year.
He can skate.
Yeah,
he can skate.
But the thing is that I had a retired player, a guy of our generation, Jeff, say that there's nothing wrong with that hit. And the point I said to him is, when you played, there was nothing wrong with that hit. When Scott Stevens played, there was nothing wrong with that hit. But now it's different, and now there is something wrong with that hit.
I think you have to change that statement to that one. There was nothing wrong.
That's what I say. There was nothing.
It took me a long time to get here too.
There isn't the stomach for this anymore. Now with what we know about concussions, and even though the NHL is fighting the concussion lawsuit, don't tell me it hasn't changed the game. The NFL settled its concussion lawsuit. Yeah. But if you watch the National Football League, you can see every week how much the game has changed. If Clay Matthews has gotten all these penalties early in the year and people are fighting, is this really a penalty? It's the same thing that the NHL is going through. The bottom line is your consumers don't have the stomach for this anymore. Mm-hmm. Now, I think the biggest question, again, as you said, we're recording this before the hearing. Last spring in the Penguin series, he had two big hits. One was on Dumoulin, one was on Aston Reese. He didn't get suspended for the Dumoulin. He did get suspended for the Aston Reese. I know that one thing that happened was with the Aston Reese hit, they had video that showed he got the head, that the main point of the contact was the head.
And that ended up being a broken jaw.
But the fact is, you can have a broken jaw if you hit the shoulder first. But they had a shot, and they didn't have that for Dumoulin. They weren't as confident in the camera angles they had for Dumoulin. And, I think that from what I've seen with Sundqvist, it's hard to tell. And I just think, to me, the question is, do they have a shot that says he clearly got Sundqvist's head? And if they do, because the second part of the question is this avoidable? And absolutely it's avoidable. If they have a shot that says to them that they clearly got Sundqvist's head, he's getting a big number. He's getting a very big number.
I wonder what constitutes a big number at this, because there's
Torres got 25, right?
Yeah, there's some you're never going to satisfy. Like there's some people, like you could throw 25 at them and they'll still say not enough. That if you want to erratic, get rid of this, get this out of the game, get these types of hits from this specific player. But everyone has a different number.
Everything is precedence, right?
You're thinking Torres Hossa.
Well, I do, because if the league wanted to do that, and I don't know that they do want to do that, I'm just saying if they wanted to do that, they could point and say, here's Torres, and that's what he got. Mm-hmm. And that's the way this all goes, right? Because it always gets lawyered up. Mm-hmm. Can we justify this on appeal? And if Wilson doesn't like George Parros' suspension, he can go to the commissioner, and if he doesn't like what the commissioner says, he can go to the arbitrator. The risk is always that the commissioner or the arbitrator could give him more. But because there's something in the book that says, a guy with a history like Torres got this, I think the league could argue that he could get that if it wanted to.